From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. More violent clashes have been reported between protesters and the police in Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince. At least one person died on the first week of demonstrations demanding the resignation of President Jovenel Moise. At least 7 people have died since the wave of protests began last Thursday. Protesters accuse the president of breaking his promises and increasing poverty in the country. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has strongly criticized a meeting between the presidents of Colombia and the United States that focused on the situation in his country. Maduro described the meeting as, quote, a feast of hatred that only seeks U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. The president also said that the two countries keep focusing on Venezuela instead of tackling the growing problem of coca production in Colombia.
The statements are awful from the two people who met. Rather than discuss the cocaine produced in Colombia that infects and destroys the American youth, Donald Trump is silent on the cocaine and drug trafficking that comes from Colombia and only talks about Venezuela.
President Maduro also called on the world to stand in solidarity with Venezuela in light of U.S. military threats.
Today, once again, the President of the United States has threatened a military intervention in Venezuela. So I ask all the people in the world to join in solidarity and to continue with the campaign, Hands Off Venezuela, Donald Trump.
Meanwhile, Cuba's government has denounced U.S. deployments of special forces in parts of the Caribbean without consent. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez says this is part of the preparation for a potential military intervention in Venezuela. The island is calling on the international community to join forces and stop any kind of interference. In Uruguay, the government and the opposition continue to hold talks with the aim of helping Venezuela find a peaceful solution to its political situation. We have the details in this report.
This is still at the center of Uruguay's domestic politics. Congressman and member of the Colorado Red Party, Pedro Bordaberry, has called on the country's external affairs minister to explain the government's position on Venezuela.
What Uruguay is doing is betting on peace and democracy for Venezuelans. However, dissenting voices have been trying to distort Uruguay's position on the issue.
The opposition, on the other hand, has questioned the government's call for dialogue. Communist Party member Juan Castillo has supported ongoing international dialogue while criticizing the interventionist position of the Uruguayan right.
The right in America repeats the same discourse, just using various tones of voices, and many buy what is being said. But if you close your eyes and listen, you will hear the same narrative that exists in Argentina, Brazil and Colombia. The right is always dancing to the music of imperialism.
Senator Constanza Moreira, who heads the group Casa Grande, has also weighed in.
The External Affairs Minister's view was the reconnection of Guaidó set a super negative precedent in Latin America. It not only allows for constitutional interpretation, but also encourages military intervention. What is needed is dialogue, to ensure that the Venezuelan opposition does not have the legitimacy it pretends to have.
To Uruguay's government, Venezuela today is at the center of a global geopolitical dispute, and the United States is only interested in its oil. Analyst Juan Raúl Ferreira notes that most Uruguayans are supporting the call for non-interference in matters of other states.
I believe that in Uruguay, there is widespread understanding that historically, the best diplomatic approach has been one of non-intervention, self-determination, and the peaceful resolution of such political matters. We hold firmly to that position.
As the parliamentary session came to an end, the foreign minister reminded that talks on Venezuela have already begun, within the framework of the Montevideo Mechanism and the International Contact Group.
Mateo Grille, Telesur, Montevideo, Uruguay.
And the Lima Group will meet on February 25 in Colombia's capital, Bogotá, to discuss the situation in Venezuela. Colombian President Iván Duque announced this during his meeting at the White House. The United States is not a member of the group, but has taken part of meetings before. The group recently met twice before in Peru and Canada to address the political situation. Now to Colombia. On Thursday, the FARC will report to the Special Jurisdiction for Peace about a number of kidnappings. At a private hearing, the 31 former members of the FARC Secretariat will address its participation in the kidnappings of Colombians and foreigners between 1993 and 2012. The judge says the testimonies will be compared with reports delivered from the Public Prosecutor's Office, social organizations and victims before a final ruling is made.
La sala requiere la verdad. Entre los guerrilleros citados están Iván Márquez y el Paisa, sobre los cuales se desconoce su paradero.
The government of Panama has rejected its inclusion on the European Union high-risk list. The European Commission says Panama is weak on preventing money laundering and fighting terrorist financing.
The Republic of Panama categorically rejects our country's inclusion on a discriminatory list conducted through a murky procedure, and I want to emphasize murky because there was no opportunity for dialogue with our government.
We are not going to skimp on taking any other measure against these countries that are unfairly discriminating against Panama.
Costa Rica's former president Oscar Arias has presented himself at the prosecutor's office to face a formal complaint for sexual misconduct. The former Miss Costa Rica beauty queen Jasmine Morales says Arias sexually assaulted her in 2015. According to Morales, Arias forced himself on her at his home after he had contacted her via social media. Both Arias and his lawyer have refused to make any statements to the press.
To be a voice, to not stay quiet. I am keeping to the Me Too movement, and I've already spoken with the first accuser who has exposed him to a crime.
Tension has spread in a temporary migrant shelter in the Mexican town of Piedras Negras near the U.S. border. A group of migrants complained they were not allowed to leave the shelter to buy food and other items. They pushed fences and threw tables and several chairs towards police. Tensions also spiked after a migrant accused the police of stealing his money.
All we want to do is go into town on foot to buy something, but no, they won't even let us do that. They don't want anyone to be able to come back. People have been waiting in line since 6 a.m. and nothing happens, and it's provoking this.
They should let them go and see. They should at least let us out. We came in a caravan, and what are they doing? Taking people little by little? They've tricked them. They're taking people little by little on the buses to separate the caravan. They lied. They bring migrants up in a bus after bus, but they didn't tell them they were going to stick them in here. The others didn't know it was a pen. They're closing them in and out. They won't let them leave.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The United Nations and the European Union have launched a global initiative in Honduras to fight gender violence. The initiative is called Spotlight and will focus on eliminating femicide in Argentina, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. The EU pledged it will give around $58 million for the project that is expected to run for several years. Social movements and public workers took to the streets in Ecuador to protest against economic measures put in place by the government of Lenín Moreno. Demonstrators said they are against the privatization of public companies and recent talks the government held with the International Monetary Fund. Public workers are also demanding the return of the debt recently forgiven to bankers. They say they will continue protesting until the government agrees to hold talks.
We as workers have the right to give our opinion when we don't agree with a situation. And it is our right to oppose a situation that goes against the country. Politicians were chosen to represent the people and defend our patrimony, and they are not doing it.
There has been no dialogue with the government, as we had proposed, so we organized this march. If there is no dialogue, at least we can tell people that we're going to keep fighting for our country, that even if the government keeps closing the door, we will defend what's ours. They won't stop us.
Our correspondent Denise Herrera was at the march and sent us this report.
Hello, we are at the Simón Bolívar Plaza, close to the center of Quito, where several organizations of Ecuadorian workers are gathering today against the latest economic measures imposed by President Lenin Moreno. They are against the increase of the prices of gasoline. They are against the recent talks between the IMF and the government, and they are really worried about the current situation of Ecuador today. So we will talk with one of the representatives of the workers with Washington Silva, who will tell us what is going on in Ecuador, why they are really worried about the situation in Ecuador. Welcome and
we are representatives of essential sectors such as electricity, telecommunications, education and health. We have gathered to protest against new taxes imposed by the government and what we see as the persecution the public sector is suffering. They want to privatize our patrimony. We ask both the national and international communities to unite against this neoliberal government. The government councillor, Santiago Cuesta, has threatened the people and tried to turn them against each other. We will not allow the corrupt right wing to sell our country, our patrimony, and go against the Ecuadorian citizens. We will keep protesting until we get an answer.
Thank you very much. It is one of the arguments of the workers here in Ecuador. They are defending their rights. They are asking President Lenin Moreno to defend worker rights, and also they are calling to all the citizens to defend their rights. So it's all for now. Back to you at the studios.
That was Denise Herrera from Quito. And in Argentina, thousands also marched in the streets of Buenos Aires to demand an end to the government's austerity measures. Social movements say these hurt the most vulnerable in society.
The sound of drums reverberates throughout the city. This mass demonstration reached downtown Buenos Aires, where social movements demanded that Mauricio Macri's government provide them with bread, work and dignity. They also want the president to put an end to austerity measures that have greatly impacted the poor.
We don't want neoliberalism to leave us in misery, for it to condemn countless families into hunger. We are here to call out the failure of this government's economic policies.
While the government and media corporations take aim at marches, workers demand social programs and a food emergency law to support soup kitchens. On top of this, they ask that mass layoffs be stopped for good.
There is widespread hunger in Argentina. Many kids are not able to eat more than once a day. Our government looks to the other side and will only talk about Venezuela. There are so many issues that need to be resolved here. We need politicians to help those in need.
Protesters outrightly rejected the government's economic measures, calling them repressive. They're accusing the government of bowing to the demands of the International Monetary Fund.
This is not about them being unable to help. It's about two different points of view. These economic policies favor certain groups. They favor one single social class. Poverty, unemployment, they are a direct consequence of the government's policies that are working to please the International Monetary Fund.
Argentina's opposition wants the government to pay the ultimate political price for the measures that are hurting those who have the least. Social movements will continue to mobilize as inflation and unemployment continues to rise.
At least 9 people have been killed in a bus accident in southern Peru. The crash happened Tuesday night on a highway between Ilo and Tacna when a truck crashed into a minivan in the oncoming lane. Some were seriously injured and taken to medical clinics for treatment.
We have been working to rescue a person trapped in the middle of the minibus. In the front, 3 of the injured, who were serious, have been taken to the hospital.
Indigenous peoples' rights in Peru have been constitutionally violated in favor of corporations. Leaders are now rallying to fight for their rights.
The regional government of Loreto has granted 41 new deforestation licenses within areas occupied by indigenous communities, which is illegal. The National Forest and Wildlife Service published a map highlighting logging points.
Deforestation also harms the environment, as well as the rights of indigenous communities. This is urgent. The state cannot support the industry if it goes against human rights.
The regional organization of indigenous people from Orpio has taken action against the government's decision.
We are organizing protests and taking legal actions as per the law that states they cannot grant deforestation concessions inside indigenous communities. We invite the world to support the rights of indigenous people that are not only in Peru, but also in Brazil, Colombia, and Paraguay. There are laws in Latin America to protect these people.
Social organizations are helping communities to take legal actions and to raise awareness about the impact of granting deforestation licenses in indigenous territories.
The government is prioritizing businesses over human and indigenous rights. For this reason, the Ombudsman's office has demanded the regional government of Loreto to take a step back on its decision and to guarantee the integrity of indigenous communities.
However, neither the Ombudsman Office or the Ministry of Interculturality have been successful in stopping the regional government of Loreto granting licenses.
Chilean authorities have seized 59 endangered macaws hidden in boxes in the outskirts of capital Santiago. Custom agents found 29 of these colorful macaws in boxes packed in the back of a taxi. They say the animal traffickers stole the baby birds from their nests in the city of Osorno. Now Chile's National Zoo is taking care of the animals before returning them to the wild. A shield believed to have belonged to the Aztec Emperor Montezuma has been put on display. The piece is being shown at Mexico City's National Museum of History. Curators say that the shield was likely used by the indigenous ruler for ceremonial purposes. Montezuma ruled Tenochtitlan until he was killed in the early stages of Spanish conquest in 1520. We're taking one last break. Stay with us.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump insists that all options are on the table when it comes to Venezuela. But on Wednesday, Congress made it clear they will oppose any military action in the country.
Under U.S. law, Congress, not the president, must approve foreign military action. Democrats clarified this point during a special hearing on Venezuela.
But I do worry about the president's saber-rattling, his hints that the U.S. military intervention remains an option. I want to make clear to our witnesses and to everyone else watching, U.S. military intervention is not an option. Congress decides when, where, and how the U.S. military is used around the world, and Congress would not support military intervention in Venezuela.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Special Envoy to Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, was strongly condemned and questioned by the Democrats over his credibility to lead this mission, given his history in the Iran-Contra affair. Newly elected Congresswoman Ilhan Omar confronted Abrams.
Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
Still, Abrams asked other countries to assist the United States intervention efforts in Venezuela.
And as we meet today, Mr. Chairman, the State Department and its interagency partners are hard at work, responding to Interim President Guaido's call for international humanitarian assistance. We invite international partners to join us in helping to fill warehouses and assistance centers.
While Abrams continued his attack on Venezuela and the government of President Nicolás Maduro, activists from the Code Pink social movement interrupted his speech. The women-led organization works on ending U.S. wars and is against militarism. 2 activists from the group were arrested by security officers.
All persons in the audience,
For now, it is clear that any U.S.-led military action is not the available option for President Donald Trump against Venezuela.
A bomb attack in Kashmir has killed at least 18 members of the Indian paramilitary police force. The Islamist group Jaish-e-Mohammed has taken responsibility. This comes a day after an explosion wounded a dozen school children, also in Kashmir. The blast happened in a 10th grade classroom, but authorities say it's unclear what caused it.
We were taking class. Suddenly we heard a blast. Someone said it might be a transformer. But when we went outside, we saw it came from a classroom. 5, 6 boys went there. After that, we don't know what happened.
4 people have been killed and others are presumed kidnapped in a Boko Haram attack in Nigeria. The target was a convoy of vehicles carrying the governor of Borno State in the country's northeast. The governor, Kashim Shettima, escaped unharmed.
We didn't see them, but rather they appeared unexpectedly while shooting sporadically. So you see, it must have frightened the people to the extent that even the driver had to stop. Some ran and hid. Some dispersed into the bush, while others were kidnapped.
Since February 9, more than 90 unarmed Syrian civilians have been killed and injured in airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition in the region of Deir ez-Zor. The coalition insists it's fighting against the Islamic State group, but the Syrian government says otherwise.
The Syrian government has called the latest onslaught of airstrikes by the US coalition a crime against humanity. The Foreign Ministry asked the UN Security Council to acknowledge and condemn these crimes. Syria is seeking an immediate disbandment of the US coalition, which is violating its sovereignty under the pretext of fighting against the Islamic State.
We support official reports made against the US-led coalition and their crimes. We say they are bombing the area to kill civilians and not the terrorists of the Islamic State, an organization that was created by the US intelligence services.
This bombing took place to hamper efforts for a diplomatic solution to the conflict, especially because it happened the day before the meeting with 3 political leaders from Turkey, Russia and Iran on February 14.
According to the coalition, their airstrikes targeted the last stronghold of the Islamic State in Syria. The US said it supports the military operation that began on the 9th of February by the Kurds.
We are saying that under the excuse of fighting against the Islamic State, the coalition massacred our people, civilians in Deir ez-Zor region. This operation is to transport foreign Islamic State fighters in US planes from Syria to other parts of the world.
More than 70 states are part of the coalition. Since 2014, it says it's fighting against the Islamic State. However, its operations on Syrian soil are not authorized by Damascus or the UN Security Council. According to the Syrian government, the coalition has not targeted the Islamic State at all. Instead, it's responsible for the death of thousands of civilians and the destruction of their infrastructure.
As part of an international campaign called Drums for Peace in Venezuela, Telesur released a song performed by several musicians from the region. It is a message against war in Venezuela and in the rest of the world. Here's a short clip.
El vuelo de vivir sin armas, como descubrir el paraíso celestial. Aquí en la tierra sin morir, aprendamos a convivir con quien no nos entienda igual para tener un porvenir donde podamos respirar. Basta ya. Suenen los ángeles de la tierra, los tambores de la paz. Quemen los tambores de la guerra para que no suenen más, para que no suenen. Suenen los tambores en mi tierra, los tambores de la paz.
So be sure to check the whole song. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're on social media as well, so go ahead and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.